The council chamber didn't empty completely. Some leaders fled in panic, but others stayed behind. They couldn't leave, not yet. They needed answers. I was standing near the exit, holding my now empty food container, with no plans to speak again. But the silence in that vast hall was heavy. It pulled at me. The Arbiter, the head of the council, remained seated on its ornate throne. It looked older somehow, not weak, just tired, human. The Arbiter's voice echoed slowly. "Before you leave, explain something to us." I turned back, genuinely curious. "Explain what?" I asked. The Arbiter gestured with a multi-jointed limb toward the massive, now partially empty chamber. "Fear," it said. "You caused it. You spread it through this chamber without a single threat, without raising a weapon, without even intending to." I let out a soft sigh. Honestly, that wasn't my goal, I admitted, looking down at my container. I was just hungry. A few of the remaining council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "That is precisely what concerns us," the Arbiter replied, its voice low and serious. "You did not try." I placed the container on a nearby table with a soft click. "All right," I said, deciding to face this head-on. "I'll explain. It's actually pretty simple." The Arbiter gave a slow, deliberate nod. I walked slowly to the center of the chamber, the floor cool beneath my boots. I didn't need to raise my voice. The acoustics in this place were perfect. "Humans don't wake up thinking about war," I began, my voice calm and even. "We think about our jobs, our families, what we're going to have for lunch." I could feel their collective attention focusing on me, every set of eyes locked in. "But here's the thing," I continued. "Earth doesn't care what we think. Our home planet challenges us every single day." I pointed a finger upward, towards the transparent dome showing the star-dusted void. "The weather can kill you. A storm, a flood, a drought. Animals can kill you. Predators far stronger and faster than us. Even our own bodies can betray us, failing without warning." I saw several council members nod slowly, a flicker of understanding in their diverse eyes. "So, humans learn a fundamental lesson very early on," I explained. "Nothing is safe. Nothing is permanent. Everything is trying to break you." The Arbiter leaned forward, its gaze intense. "And this constant struggle makes you strong?" it asked, its voice laced with a mix of awe and confusion. I shook my head. "No," I replied firmly. "It doesn't make us strong. It makes us prepared." That single word, prepared, hung in the silent air, echoing with a weight I hadn't intended. I let it sink in before continuing. "When something hurts us, our first instinct isn't to ask, 'Why did this happen to me?' We ask, 'How do I survive it next time?'" I tapped the smooth surface of the table for emphasis. "Food that burns our mouths with spice. We don't just avoid it, we learn to enjoy it. We turn pain into a delicacy. Poisons found in plants and animals. We don't just catalog them, we learn to control them, to dose them, to turn them into medicines. Extreme pressure, extreme heat, extreme cold. We don't run from it, we train under it. We build technology to withstand it. We push our bodies to adapt." From the side, a council member with the look of a scholar whispered to its neighbor, just loud enough for me to hear, "They shape themselves through suffering." I turned my head slightly in its direction. "We don't call it suffering," I clarified. "We call it life." The Arbiter remained completely still, its ancient mind processing everything I was saying. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts for the final point. "You fear us because you think we are drawn to danger, that we enjoy chaos," I said, looking directly from one council member to the next. "And you are completely wrong." I made sure to lock eyes with the Arbiter. "We hate danger. We despise instability more than you can possibly imagine. That's why we prepare for it, relentlessly." The council absorbed this. The silence was different now. It wasn't empty, it was filled with thought. A scientist, identifiable by the complex device on its wrist, finally broke the quiet. "Then why do humans actively seek challenges?" it asked, a logical and valid question. "Why climb the highest mountains? Why explore the deepest oceans? Why create risk where none exists?" A small smile touched my lips. It was a good question. "Because avoiding fear doesn't make it go away," I said softly. "Understanding it does. We face smaller, controlled risks to build the muscle we need to face the real, uncontrolled ones. We practice being afraid so that when true terror arrives, we know its face. We know how to move, how to think, how to act." The chamber fell quiet once more. The logic seemed to have settled over them, a new paradigm clicking into place. The Arbiter, after a long, thoughtful pause, spoke again. Its voice was softer now, tinged with a new kind of gravity. "And war," it asked, "if your species is attacked, If another civilization brings the ultimate danger to your doorstep, I didn't answer right away. I let the question hang, the final, unspoken piece of the puzzle. I turned my gaze back up to the starfield visible through the dome, at the countless points of light representing countless worlds. I thought about our history, our struggles, our relentless drive to simply continue. Then, I looked back at the Arbiter, and I let the truth, if my answer settle in my eyes before I even spoke a word. When humans fight, he said slowly, we don't fight to scare. The council leaned forward as one. We fight to end the threat, the human continued, completely. A chill colder than deep space seemed to settle over the grand chamber. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. One of the council leaders, a towering being of crystalline structure, rose to its full height, its form shimmering with agitation. Is that a warning? It demanded, its voice a series of resonant chimes that now sounded sharp, discordant. The human, so small in comparison yet holding the attention of the entire galactic assembly, simply shook his head. No, he said, his voice calm, steady, a stark contrast to the tension in the room. It's a promise to ourselves. The Arbiter, the ancient and respected head of the council, closed its multiple eyes for a brief moment, processing the weight of that statement. A promise to oneself is the most sacred and unbreakable of vows. You are not predators, it said, its voice a low, gravelly hum that resonated with deep thought. Predators hunt for sport, for dominance, for food. Your history, your actions, they speak of something else. The human offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod. We're survivors, he replied. And survivors don't gamble, they don't take chances, they assess, they prepare, and when they act with absolute finality. Just as the gravity of his words was sinking in, a sharp, piercing signal echoed through the chamber, interrupting the heavy silence. An aide, a slender, multi-limbed creature, scurried in, its movements frantic. Update, it announced, its voice a high-pitched buzz of urgency. The observing empire, the very reason for this emergency council, has issued a declaration. The Arbiter stiffened, its massive form becoming rigid. Speak, it commanded, the single word cutting through the rising murmurs of the council members. They will send a force. The aide relayed, its antenna twitching nervously. Not to destroy, not an invasion. Their declaration states their intent is to test human limits. A wave of confusion and unease swept through the chamber. To test? What did that even mean? Were they to be a galactic science experiment? The Arbiter turned its gaze back to the lone human representative. The fate of his species, and perhaps the balance of the galaxy, seemed to rest on his next words. Will you respond? It asked, the question carrying the weight of 1,000 star systems. The human, unfazed by the sudden development, reached down and picked up the simple, insulated container he had brought with him. It looked like nothing more than a traveler's flask. We already have, he said, his tone matter of fact. A stunned silence fell upon the council. The members exchanged bewildered glances. The aide froze mid-step. Even the Arbiter seemed taken aback. How? It asked, its voice barely a whisper, leaning forward so as not to miss the answer. The human's expression remained placid, almost serene amidst the silent chaos he had just created. By existing, he said simply. By surviving. Every day we persist in a universe that has tried to extinguish us is a response. Every star we reach, every child that is born, every challenge we overcome. That is our answer. The Arbiter rose slowly from its ornate seat, a gesture of profound significance. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, it said, its voice filled with a strange mix of awe and bewilderment. The council does not know what to advise. We are navigators of galactic policy, brokers of peace, students of history. But this is uncharted territory. The human offered a small, reassuring smile. That's okay, he said. We're used to figuring things out ourselves. It's how we got off our own death world. It's how we survived everything since. Looking around the room, he saw the spectrum of reactions. Some council members watched him with thinly veiled fear, their alien features betraying their anxiety. They saw a force they could not comprehend, a variable they could not calculate. Others, however, watched with a dawning respect. They saw resilience, a strength forged in crucibles they could only imagine. The human turned to leave, his point made. His quiet dignity was more powerful than any fleet. At the grand doorway, he paused and turned back, one hand on the frame. One more thing, he said. The entire chamber held its collective breath, waiting. If they come peacefully, he said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. We'll talk. We will share our coffee, our stories, our science. We will welcome them as potential friends, A senior counselor, a being of pure energy, pulsed a question into the air. And if they don't? The human's calm demeanor didn't change, but his eyes held a new intensity, a reflection of ancient starlight and terrestrial fire. He looked back at the Arbiter, at the Council, at the galaxy they represented. Then they'll learn, he said simply, the words carrying no malice, only the certainty of a natural law, like gravity or the speed of light. They'll learn why Earth made us this way. He didn't need to elaborate. He didn't need to threaten. The statement was complete in itself. He turned and walked out, the massive chamber doors closing behind him with a soft, final thud. Silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with thought, with revelation, with a profound and unsettling shift in understanding. The Arbiter slowly, heavily, sat back down in its chair. It looked out at the assembled leaders of the known galaxy. Mark this moment, it said, its voice quiet but resolute, a historical record being etched into the air itself. Today, the galaxy stopped misunderstanding. Humans, no one in the council disagreed. A palpable fear of what was to come lingered, a fear of the unknown, of a test whose consequences could reshape civilizations. But beneath that fear, something else was taking root, something solid, something undeniable, respect, a respect for the survivors who didn't gamble, who promised not to warn, and who carried the harsh lessons of their homeworld as both their greatest burden and their most formidable weapon. The galaxy would watch, and for the first time, it would truly see. The council chamber erupted the moment the doors closed behind the human. Voices overlapped, a cacophony of languages blending into a single, unified sound of fear. For the first time in its long and storied history, the Deathworld Council had absolutely no plan. One leader, a hulking insectoid with shimmering wings, slammed a fist on his console. They cannot be allowed to grow unchecked, he shouted, his voice a series of sharp clicks and whistles that still managed to convey pure panic. From across the circular chamber, another replied, her voice a low, guttural growl. They are already grown, she said, her tone cutting through the noise. We simply refuse to see it. The room fell into a tense, buzzing silence at her words. Everyone knew she was right. They had observed humanity for generations, cataloging them, studying them from a safe distance, always under the assumption that they were a contained, manageable species. They were a curiosity, a species born on a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over, a death world. But they were never supposed to leave it. They were never supposed to reach the stars. The Arbiter, the ancient, monolithic being who presided over the council, struck the polished floor with its crystalline claw. The sharp crack echoed through the vast chamber. Silence, it commanded, its voice resonating not in their ears, but directly in their minds. A wave of calm, enforced by sheer will, washed over the panicked assembly. Slowly, the chamber quieted, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating, like the atmosphere of a gas giant. An aide, a small, furred creature whose species was known for its meticulous record-keeping, scurried forward, its paws trembling so hard it could barely hold its datapad. My lords, Arbiter, it squeaked, its voice barely a whisper. The observing empire. They have begun mobilization. A collective gasp went through the room. Scout fleets first, as per their standard doctrine, followed by a demonstration force. A council member, a reptilian with scales that shifted colors with its mood, hissed audibly, its frill flaring in agitation. A demonstration, it spat. They still believe humans are weak. They think a show of force will make them kneel. The Arbiter's multifaceted eyes, which usually held the wisdom of millennia, darkened to a stormy abyss. Belief does not change reality, it stated, its mental voice cold and hard as neutronium. But it can certainly cause disaster. With a gesture from the Arbiter, the central holoprojector hummed to life. The grand star map of the known galaxy flared into existence, a three-dimensional tapestry of swirling nebulae and glittering stars. On one edge of the map, a vast swath of space glowed in ominous, angry red. This was the observing empire, one of the galaxy's old powers, known for its arrogance and its overwhelming military might. Now, symbols representing thousands of warships began to move, like a tide of blood, inching closer and closer to the small, unassuming sector labeled Sol System. The Council's chief strategist, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering containment suit, analyzed the display. They are close, it hummed, its voice a series of harmonic tones. Far too close for a peaceful resolution. Another leader, a long-lived silicon-based lifeform, leaned back in its floating chair, its craggy features unreadable. If they provoke the humans, it said, its voice like grinding stone. The response will not be limited. It will not be proportional. A chilling silence followed. That was the true fear gripping every heart and mind in the room. Not that the humans would lose the coming conflict, but that they would win. Win so decisively, so utterly, that the galactic balance of power, so carefully maintained by this council for eons, would be shattered forever. The Arbiter's gaze swept across the anxious faces. For cycles, this council has controlled conflict. It projected to them all. We have managed wars. We have brokered peace. We have limited destruction. It paused, letting the weight of its words sink in. Humans do not think this way. A xenobiologist, one of the foremost experts on Deathworld species, nodded grimly. They do not seek balance. It clarified, its voice clinical and precise. They do not seek to weaken an opponent or force a surrender. They seek resolution. Absolute resolution. The council understood the terrifying implication. Once humans identified something as an existential threat, they would not stop until that threat was gone. Not contained, not weakened, not negotiated with. Gone, eradicated from existence. It was the survival instinct of a species born in a cradle of constant, lethal danger, now scaled up to a galactic level. The universe was about to learn what it meant to corner a Deathworlder. Suddenly, a member from a pacifist avian species shot to its feet, its feathered crest rigid with alarm. We must distance ourselves, it chirped frantically. Publicly. Immediately. Before the first shot is fired, another voice quickly agreed. Declare neutrality. Seal our borders. Remove ourselves from any treaty or alliance that could even tangentially link us to this impending catastrophe. But a third, a wizened old ambassador who had seen empires rise and fall, shook its head slowly. It is too late, it sighed, its voice weary. We have already observed them. We have already passed judgment by our inaction. In the eyes of the galaxy, and more importantly, in the eyes of the humans, we are already involved. Our silence has been our statement. The Arbiter raised its claw once more, silencing the renewed wave of panic. Then we do what we have always done when our judgment has failed us, it declared, its voice ringing with a newfound resolve. We adapt. The word echoed in the chamber, a command and a prayer. Adapt. And with that single word, the paralysis broke. The council, the most powerful political body in the galaxy, finally began to move. Orders flew through the room, no longer driven by fear, but by the cold, hard logic of survival. Evacuate all non-essential personnel from the outer sectors. Secure the council archives. All data, especially records of our observations of Earth. Restrict all civilian and commercial travel through corridors bordering human-controlled space. Begin emergency resource allocation protocols. Prioritize planetary shields and defensive fleets. The chamber, once a hall of stagnant debate, transformed into a whirlwind of purposeful activity. Leaders rose from their seats, barking commands into their comms. Guards in gleaming ceremonial armor formed disciplined lines, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos of moments before. Transports were summoned from their orbital docks, their engines flaring to life. The great machine of the council was finally, belatedly, responding to the crisis. Amidst the structured storm, one council member hesitated. It was the same one who had first pointed out that humanity was already grown. She approached the Arbiter, who was overseeing the data transfer from the central archives. Arbiter, she said, her voice low, what about the human, the ambassador we just dismissed? Should we warn them about the demonstration force? Tell them what's coming. The Arbiter paused its work, its massive form turning slightly. For a moment, the ancient being seemed to contemplate the question. Then, it responded, its mental voice quiet, almost mournful. We already did, it said, by listening to them, by treating them as an equal in this chamber for the first time. That was our warning. The star map in the center of the room updated again. The red tide of the observing Empire's fleets continued its inexorable advance, but the section of space representing human territory remained unchanged. It glowed with a soft, calm, blue light. No fleet symbols appeared. No weapon systems powered up. No frantic signals emanated from their worlds. There was only silence. A calm, patient, and terrifying silence. The silence of a predator that knows its prey is walking right into its jaws. And the council could only watch, and adapt, and pray that when the dust settled, there would be a galaxy left to govern. They're doing nothing. That was the strategist's conclusion, delivered with a mix of confusion and fear. The Arbiter, presiding over the Deathworld Council, simply nodded. That is what frightens them, it said, and it should frighten us. The chamber buzzed with unease. A council member from a predatory species leaned forward, whispering. Predators panic before the strike. But this wasn't panic. This was something else. Something colder. Suddenly, a piercing siren cut through the tension. Council leader evacuation window closing. A calm, synthetic voice announced. The words shattered the fragile composure of the room. Panic erupted again, raw and primal. Leaders, beings who commanded star systems, scrambled for the exits like startled prey. Others, however, hesitated. Their eyes were drawn to a single empty seat, the one where the human representative had sat just hours before. One leader, a hulking being of rock and crystal, stopped and stared at the polished council table. All this, it murmured, its voice barely a whisper, because one human ate lunch. The arbiter watched the chaotic exodus, the chamber emptying with desperate speed, but it remained behind. Deep, old instinct screamed at it to flee, to join the panicked flight into the void. But an even older wisdom, a sense of cosmic responsibility, held it in place. Its aide, a being of nervous energy and shifting light, approached once more. Arbiter, it stammered, the observing empire has sent a message. The arbiter's gaze remained fixed on the star chart. Display it, it commanded. The message materialized in the air before them, a shimmering cascade of alien script. The tone was unmistakable, confident, cold, arrogant. The observing empire, a power that had watched from the galactic rim for centuries, declared its intentions. They would enter human space. They would test their defenses. They would prove their own unquestionable superiority. The arbiter closed its eyes, a weary sigh escaping its ancient form. They still don't understand, it said softly. The aide swallowed audibly, the sound echoing in the now vast emptiness of the council chamber. Should we intervene? The arbiter slowly shook its head. No, it said, the word final. This lesson cannot be taught. It must be learned. The chamber fell silent. Outside, the viewports showed the last of the council ships streaking away, their drives tearing holes in spacetime as they fled, faster than light running. The arbiter was alone, a solitary figure in a hall built for a galactic coalition. It looked out at the sea of stars, at the silent, indifferent cosmos. It remembered the human's calm voice during the initial emergency session. Not defiant, not aggressive, just prepared. He had said that survivors don't gamble. They plan. They endure. They prepare. The council had dismissed it as the blustering of a primitive from a backwater world. They had been so terribly wrong. Another alert chimed, this one from a different source. Human channels. A simple, wideband broadcast, unencrypted and open for all to see. There were no threats, no declarations of war, no anger. Just a message, clear and direct. We see you, the human transmission said, the voice calm and even. You are entering our space. It was a statement of fact, nothing more. The observing empire, in their hubris, replied instantly. Their message was a torrent of demands. Surrender, submission, acknowledgement of their dominion. The arbiter watched the galactic chess game unfold on the display. The human response, when it came, was breathtaking in its simplicity. No, a single word, carrying the weight of a species forged in the crucible of a death world. It was not a negotiation. It was a line drawn across the stars. The observing empire, enraged by this defiance, moved its fleets forward. The arbiter stood, its ancient joints creaking. This is the moment, it said to the empty chamber. Just then, a single council member stumbled back into the room, breathless and wild-eyed. It was the predatory one, the one who spoke of panic before the strike. They're leaving, it gasped. All of them. Every council leader has fled. The arbiter simply nodded. Wise, it said, its gaze never leaving the star map. The map showed the point of first contact. The Empire's lead ship crossing the border into human-claimed territory. No weapons fired. No energy signatures flared. Just a profound, terrifying silence. The arbiter whispered to itself, a truth it had only recently come to understand. When humans stopped talking, it said, Earth is deciding. For so long, the Council had seen humanity as fragile, emotional, a species prone to internal conflict and irrationality, a minor power, held in check by its own chaotic nature. But now, they feared something far worse, a species that did not rush into battle, a species that did not boast or threaten, a species that prepared. And now, a very arrogant empire, and a very silent galaxy, were about to learn precisely why the Deathworld Council had run. They were about to learn what happens when survivors stop talking. The star map shimmered. The lead ship of the observing empire's fleet, a vessel of immense size and power, simply vanished from the display. Not an explosion, not a distress call. It was just gone. A second ship, then a third, blinked out of existence in the same silent, inexplicable way. No debris, no energy blooms, just absence. The Empire's fleet, a force that could have shattered moons, halted its advance. Confusion rippled through their communications, then fear. They were firing now, wildly, into empty space. Lances of energy tore through the void, striking nothing. The human response remained the same, silence. The Arbiter watched, its ancient heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. This was not war as the galaxy knew it. This was pest control. The humans had not built a wall of fire and steel. They had built a mousetrap, and the Empire had arrogantly marched right in. The human representative's words echoed again. Survivors don't gamble. This wasn't a gamble. This was a certainty. This was the result of millennia of surviving a world that tried to kill them every single day. They had turned their solar system not into a fortress, but into an intricate, layered system of impossibilities. Gravitic anomalies, temporal traps, dimension-shredding fields, horrors the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine, let alone build. The Empire's fleet began to break. Ships turned to flee, but found their escape routes gone. Space itself seemed to fold around them, twisting and distorting. They were not being fought. They were being disassembled, piece by piece, by an enemy they could not see, could not understand, and could not touch. The human broadcast returned, the same calm voice cutting through the Empire's panicked screams. You were warned. The Arbiter finally sat down in its high-backed chair, the weight of ages settling upon it. The lesson was being taught, and it was a brutal one. The galaxy had long operated on the principles of strength, of projecting power, of fleets and armies. Humans operated on a different principle, survival, and survival meant ensuring that a threat, once identified, could never, ever be a threat again. The observing Empire would not be defeated. It would be erased. The Arbiter looked at the empty seats around it. They ran because they finally understood. You don't poke a Deathworlder, not because they are strong, but because they are prepared, and their preparations are born from nightmares you cannot even conceive. The galaxy would be a much quieter, more respectful place from now on. The first contact with humanity didn't start with fire and fury, and that, more than anything else, confused everyone. The fleets of the observing Empire, a civilization known for its military might, entered human-controlled space in a display of perfect, intimidating formation. Their weapons were fully charged, their shields pulsed with active energy. They had come expecting to see fear, to receive panicked hails, to witness a primitive species scrambling before their might. Instead, they received silence. Human space stations, massive orbital habitats and defense platforms did not power up their weapon systems. Human ships did not advance to meet them in a show of defiance. No threats were broadcast across the channels. There was only a quiet, persistent series of tracking signals, following every single move the Imperial fleet made. Aboard the flagship, the Empire's commanders laughed. They hesitate. One of them sneered, convinced of their superiority. They're afraid. They know they stand no chance. Confident in this assessment, the fleet pushed deeper into human territory, moving past Jupiter, then Mars, heading for the cradle of humanity itself. And that was when space itself seemed to change. Human ships appeared, but not in the way anyone expected. They didn't materialize in front of the fleet or jump in from behind. They were simply everywhere, all at once. There was no loud warp signature, no dramatic flash of light announcing their arrival. It was as if they had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting. The bridge of the Imperial flagship went silent. The laughter died in their throats. Scans, initially showing an empty void, suddenly lit up with hundreds of contacts. Then thousands. It was a staggering mix of vessels. There were old, decommissioned designs from forgotten conflicts, side by side with the newest, most advanced warships humanity could field. Most shockingly, there were countless civilian ships, freighters, miners, colony vessels, all visibly modified for defense, bristling with improvised armor and weapons. And every single ship, from the smallest fighter to the largest dreadnought, was positioned perfectly. Their formation was not a wall, it was a net, a three-dimensional web that had completely enveloped the invading fleet. Every angle was covered, every escape route was cut off. Then, for the first time, the human commander spoke. His voice, calm and even, echoed across all Imperial channels. It held no anger, no fear, just a simple statement of fact. You are trespassing, he said. This is your only warning. The Imperial Admiral, recovering from his shock, was filled with indignant rage. How dare this upstart species speak to him with such authority? He broadcast back, his voice booming with arrogance. He demanded their immediate and unconditional surrender. He listed the consequences of defiance. He promised swift and total annihilation. There was a pause. The human commanders seemed to consider the demand. Then, a single, unwavering word came in reply. No. That was all. Just no. The Empire fired first. Blinding lances of energy tore through the void, aimed at the heart of the human fleet. It was a devastating opening salvo, enough to cripple any conventional navy. But the human ships did not panic. They didn't even scatter. Their defense systems, seemingly linked as one, adjusted instantly. Shields flared, absorbing and redirecting impossible amounts of energy. Formations shifted with liquid grace, minimizing exposure, protecting weaker vessels. The damage that did get through was absorbed, contained, and isolated. Then came the human response. It wasn't a loud, overwhelming counter-barrage. It was precise, surgical, a series of targeted strikes, almost too fast for Imperial sensors to track, lanced out from the human ships. They didn't aim for bridges or life support. They didn't target reactors with the intent to destroy. One by one, the strikes disabled engines. They shut down weapon systems. They fried communication arrays. Ship after ship in the mighty Imperial fleet fell silent, not destroyed, not crippled beyond repair, simply stopped, neutralized. The entire battle ended faster than it had begun. The once proud Imperial fleet now drifted powerless, a collection of ghost ships in the dark. The human commander's voice returned, still just as calm as before. "You are alive," he said. That was a choice. There was no reply. No one on the Imperial bridges could even form a coherent thought. And across the galaxy, on a shielded world hidden in a nebula, the members of the Deathworld Council watched the events unfold in stunned silence. They had been observing humanity for decades, cataloging their strange, often contradictory nature. They had expected a bloody, desperate fight. But there were no victory cries from the humans, no celebratory broadcasts. There was just a cold, quiet efficiency. A council scientist, a being of pure data, whispered in awe. They ended the fight without rage, without passion. The arbiter, the ancient leader of the council, nodded slowly, its many eyes fixed on the display. They ended the threat. It corrected softly, not the fight. Back in the Sol system, human recovery teams moved in. They skillfully boarded the disabled Imperial ships. They rescued the survivors, who were expecting execution but instead were met with medics. They treated the wounded. They even began repairing the damage to the Imperial vessels. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't hold anyone for ransom. When the repairs were sufficient, they sent every single ship and every single crew member home. The message, delivered without a single boast, was terrifyingly clear. Humans did not seek conquest. They had no interest in empire, but they would not be tested. They would not be threatened. Not again. News of the Battle of No spread faster than light, and a single, chilling truth echoed through the star systems, discussed in hushed tones from the core worlds to the outer rim. Humans were not dangerous because they attacked you. They were dangerous because they finished things. Weeks later, the observing empire, humbled and terrified, issued a formal, galaxy-wide public apology. Humanity simply replied, acknowledged, and the silence returned. But this time, everyone knew what that silence meant. Borders were redrawn. Treaties were signed. No one dared to argue. Weeks later, the Deathworld Council reconvened. This time, the chamber was full. But the atmosphere was entirely different. The fear that once hung heavy in the air was gone, replaced by a thick blanket of caution and a newfound respect. The arbiter, the council's leader, stood to address the assembly. Its voice resonated through the silent hall. "Let the record show," it declared, "that humanity is reclassified." Across the chamber, screens flickered and updated in unison. The text was stark and clear for all to see. Species status, humanity, category, Deathworld adaptive, and the most crucial line of all, threat level, do not provoke. A heavy silence filled the room, a testament to the gravity of this change. After a moment, a council member from a far-flung system tentatively raised appendage. "What of future conflicts?" it asked, its voice laced with uncertainty. The arbiter's response was calm and measured. "There will be fewer," it said simply. "Everyone is now paying attention." The implication was clear. The incident with the human had served as a galaxy-wide wake-up call. No one was eager to repeat the mistakes of the past. The galaxy had learned, the hard way, that provoking humanity was a gamble no sane species was willing to take. Just then, the doors to the chamber slid open, and the human representative returned. He wore the same simple clothes, his expression just as placid and unreadable as before. But this time, he carried another container, identical to the one that had caused such pandemonium. A wave of tension rippled through the room. Several council members physically stiffened, their bodies betraying their ingrained fear. The human noticed their reaction and a small, knowing smile touched his lips. "Relax," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast hall. "This one's just salad." A wave of nervous, hesitant laughter broke the tension. It was a strange sound in this usually solemn chamber, a mix of relief and lingering apprehension. The arbiter gestured for silence, its gaze fixed on the human. "Human," it said, its tone holding a new weight. "Your species has single-handedly changed the galaxy." The human simply shrugged, a gesture of profound understatement. "We didn't mean to," he replied. "We just wanted to live." His words were simple, yet they carried the immense weight of his species' history, a history of struggle and survival against all odds. The arbiter studied him for a long moment, as if trying to comprehend the sheer resilience of his kind. "You face death daily on your world," it stated, not as a question, but as a fact it was only now beginning to understand. "And you learned from it." The human nodded slowly. "Earth teaches fast," he said. It was a short, powerful statement that explained everything. The harsh realities of their homeworld had forged them into something the rest of the galaxy could barely comprehend. They weren't conquerors, they were survivors, honed by a planet that was, by galactic standards, a relentless killer. In the wake of this new understanding, the Council worked to finalize a new set of laws. The old ways were abolished. There would be no more forced biological tests on newly discovered species, no more arrogant demonstrations of supposed superiority, and most importantly, no more assumptions of weakness based on appearances. Humanity was granted a full voice on the Council, not as rulers or conquerors, but as equals. They had earned their seat not through force of arms, but through an unintentional display of their fundamental nature. As the historic meeting drew to a close, the arbiter spoke one last time, its voice filled with a sense of historical irony. "This council once fled in terror," it said, its gaze sweeping across the now respectful assembly. "Because one human ate lunch." The chamber remained utterly quiet, every member recalling the chaos and panic of that day. "And today," the arbiter continued, its voice gaining strength, "the galaxy sleeps safer because humans, despite their terrifying potential, chose restraint." It was a profound acknowledgement of humanity's character. They possessed the capacity for immense destruction, but their first instinct was not to dominate, but to coexist. The human picked up his container, the mundane object now a symbol of galactic change. "Same time, next cycle?" he asked with a casual air that belied the monumental events of the day. For the first time, a small, almost imperceptible smile formed on the arbiter's face. "Bring lunch," it replied. The human let out a soft laugh and turned to leave the chamber, leaving behind a council and a galaxy forever altered. Far away, across unimaginable distances, on a small blue planet called Earth, people went about their normal lives. They cooked food, filled with complex chemicals and bacteria that would kill most other life forms. They complained about their jobs, they raised families, they trained their bodies and minds. They adapted, constantly and unconsciously, to the deadly paradise they called home. They were completely unaware that the collective gaze of the galaxy was now fixed upon them, watching with a mixture of awe, caution, and profound respect, because once, a council of beings who saw themselves as titans and monsters learned a humbling truth: humans were not built to rule the stars or to forge empires. Their strength wasn't in conquest. They were built for something far more fundamental, something forged in the crucible of their own world. They were built to survive, to endure anything and everything the universe could possibly throw at them. And sometimes, all it took to prove that to a galaxy of disbelievers was lunch. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from across the cosmos. See you next time.